people in Gaza, and we call for an immediate ceasefire. Montenegro also strongly condemned the horrific terrorist attack by Hamas on October the 7th, 2023, and calls for unconditional release of all hostages. Montenegro has consistently supported a peaceful resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict based on the two-state solution, in full accordance with international law and relevant United Nations resolutions. And this is why we also endorsed the New York Declaration on the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of the two-state solution. Dear colleagues, dear delegates, Montenegro fully supports the implementation of the UN Pact for the Future, as well as the Seville Compromise, a renewed global commitment for financing sustainable development, as important steps in strengthening our collective capacity to respond to global challenges. And we also believe that the upcoming second World Summit for Social Development must move decisively beyond reflection and analysis and deliver concrete, tangible solutions that will improve lives of people across the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, back in 1991, Montenegro proudly became the world's first ecological state, a milestone that proclaimed our commitment to the highest principles of environmental protection, the preservation of nature, and the pursuit of sustainable development. UN Agenda 2030 remains our guiding light for sustainable development. And Montenegro takes pride in being among the first countries in the world to integrate all the SDGs into its national framework almost a decade ago. A further important step in advancing the implementation of the 2030 Agenda was the creation of the SDG Acceleration Fund, a powerful mechanism for financing SDG goals. Ladies and gentlemen, for Montenegro, the priority is clear, which is to create conditions that will enable our young people to build their future at home, offering them equal opportunities to thrive. And by insisting on the value of knowledge and ensuring equal access to education, we strive to reduce inequalities and empower our citizens to reach their full potential. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change must be tackled globally and urgently. And it is no longer just warnings from the scientists. It is floods that swallow villages and cities, fires that destroy forests, fields, and homes, and delaying a more decisive action on the international scale means gambling with the lives of those who live today, but also of the future generations. Dear colleagues, rapid technological change, and particularly the rise of the artificial intelligence, must be harnessed in a safe, responsible, and inclusive manner. Technology should be an evolutionary gift to humanity, developed, founded, and guided with social responsibility, serving the greater good. Ladies and gentlemen, globally, human rights and fundamental freedoms continue to face serious challenges. And while significant progress has been achieved in advancing women's rights since the adoption of the Beijing Declaration, much remains to be done. In this regard, Montenegro is fully committed to gender equality. We have harmonized national policies with the best international standards, strengthened our institutions dedicated to the protection of women's rights, and promoted women's leadership in all spheres of our society. Your Excellencies, as we celebrate today 80 years of shared achievements, our collective task is to reform the United Nations and prepare it for the challenges and opportunities of the future. Criticism of the UN reflects not just on the organization itself, but on all of us as member states. For it is we who have created it, who guide it, and who bear responsibility to strengthen it. This is why Montenegro strongly supports the Secretary General's Reform Initiative UN 80. It must not be seen as a mere bureaucratic exercise, but embraced as a commitment, a solemn commitment that the United Nations of tomorrow will be more agile and more efficient. And at the heart of these efforts must remain the UN's three key pillars: peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights, as the bedrock of all United Nations action. To conclude, dear friends, Montenegro is firm in its conviction that the United Nations must remain the cornerstone of peace, international law must prevail over force, and the rule-based order must be further strengthened. For without these principles, there can be no trust among nations, no true security, and no hope for a just and lasting peace in the world. And let me, at the end, quote the most famous writer from our part of the world and the Nobel Prize laureate, Ivo Andrić, who wrote in his masterpiece, The Bridge on the River Drina, of everything that man erects and builds in his urge for living, nothing is, in my eyes, better and more valuable than bridges. They are more important than houses, more sacred than temples, for they belong to all and are equal for everyone. Dear colleagues, this timeless truth reminds us that bridges are not only structures of stone, but structures of peace. It is a dialogue that builds bridges, and it is only through bridges that nations can walk towards peace. So our task is not to be passive heirs of history, but active builders of a better legacy. So let the next 80 years of the United Nations be not years of hesitation, but of courage and solidarity. So guided by these values, Montenegro will continue to build bridges, strengthen dialogue, and work tirelessly towards a future of stability, future of progress, and future of common success, fully aligned with the very spirit and mission of the United Nations. Thank you very much for your attention.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the President of Montenegro. In accordance with Resolution 80/1 of 19 September 2025, I give the floor to the distinguished observer of the Observer State of Palestine to introduce an address by the head of a state.
In the name of God the Merciful, the Compassionate, Her Excellency Annalena Baerbock, President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellencies, Highnesses, and Heads of Delegations, may the mercy and blessings of God be upon you. I speak to you today after almost 2 years in which our Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip have been facing a war of genocide, destruction, starvation, and displacement waged by the Israeli occupation forces, in which they killed and injured more than 220,000 Palestinians, the majority of whom are unarmed children, women, and the elderly. A war in which they displaced hundreds of thousands and prevented the entry of food and medical supplies and caused the starvation of 2 million Palestinians. They imposed a stifling siege on an entire people and destroyed more than 80% of homes, schools, hospitals, churches, mosques, facilities, and infrastructure. What Israel is carrying out is not merely an aggression. It is a war crime and a crime against humanity that is both documented and monitored, and it will be recorded in history books and the pages of international conscience as one of the most horrific chapters of humanitarian tragedy in the 20th and 21st centuries. In the West Bank,